On today's Locked On Royals podcast, the MLB trade rumors are heating up. Plus, the Royals win their first series after the All-Star break, and so far have been able to keep their plans under wrap for the trade deadline, but more teams are getting interested in Andrew Benintendi. How can that all impact the Royals coming up? The Locked On Royals podcast on Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Royals podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Royals. Email the show, lockedonroyals@gmail.com. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Royals baseball. We are free and available across all podcasting platforms, wherever you get your podcasts from. We're here for you talking Royals baseball, and right now we are deep into trade rumor season. Where will Andrew Benintendi go? What moves can the Royals make around the deadline to improve their future? And what teams are buying and what teams are selling. Plus, it was a very fun first series back from the All-Star break. So a lot to get into. Yesterday, we previewed the entire trade deadline for the Royals, talking about landing spots and possible returns for Andrew Benintendi. We talked about what players might get moved for Kansas City in this deadline, like Michael A. Taylor, like Whit Merrifield. And now it's just time to simply wait until we start to hear where things are headed. With Andrew Benintendi right now, that is the biggest domino to fall. And depending on how you view these things, it's the only domino to fall. Andrew Benintendi is going to bring back the biggest return on the trade market for Kansas City. Those pieces you get in the Andrew Benintendi trade will hopefully have a lasting impact on the organization, hopefully be able to accommodate Whit Merrifield and these young players and get this organization back to where they want to go in a couple of seasons and back to the postseason. That's the biggest goal. Because I know it sounds crazy, but 2015 is a long time ago. The Royals have not been back to the postseason since. And you want to know how you have 30-year playoff droughts that you had to snap back in 2014? You have 7, 8, 9-year playoff droughts. Then things start to snowball. Then you start to press. You move backwards in a rebuild, have to restart. That kicks the can on the road 5 more years. So you don't want to fall into that same trap. And really, you want to try to make this version of the Royals better than that version, which is, again, crazy. You went to 2 World Series. But I think that in baseball especially, given the fluky nature of it, I mean, we all watched every pitch of that World Series run in both seasons. It could have ended in the wild card round in 2014, and it could have ended in every single round in 2015. In fact, if you look around those other organizations' fan bases, the Blue Jays fan base thinks they should have beat you. The Astros fan base certainly thinks they should have beat you. And the Mets fan base is just, even though it was a 5-gamer, they are still just kicking themselves for a couple of mistakes. If that Gordon home run never happens, if the Mad Dash home never happens, how does that change the intensity, the tone in the whole series as a whole? So that being said, with how fluky that the postseason is, you don't want to look for a playoff appearance. You want to look for a playoff arrival in baseball. Because baseball, like no other sport, has the longest regular season. It plays every single day. Like there's hardly ever off days. And it's an experience that there's value in. There's value in the comfort. There's value in the camaraderie. There's value in the consistency of baseball. It's there for you every single night. And while we love watching the Chiefs win Super Bowls, I love watching the NBA. There's nothing like a good baseball summer. When you're in the mix, when you're contending, when you're in the playoff chase, and night in and night out, it feels important. And to put it blunt, that feeling has not happened since 2016 for Kansas City, past May 1st. So you want to get back to that. And so whenever I say build this core better, I'm personally not going to put the pressure of going to 2 World Series on this next core. But I am going to put the pressure of more than 2 playoff appearances on this next core. Because now you have a Bobby Witt Jr., which, for as great as that past core was with Eric Hosmer, Mike Moustakas, Lorenzo Cain, and no disrespect to Salvador Perez or Danny Duffy or anyone else in that core, there was no Bobby Witt Jr. There was no transcendent star who could be the face of baseball. That was the last true team. That was the last true just gut your way out and every piece fits together. Nobody's a superstar. You don't have Hall of Famers 1 through 9 in your lineup. In fact, you probably don't have a single Hall of Famer besides maybe Salvador Perez on that roster. But yet it worked for 2 straight pennants and a World Series win because things just fit. And there's a ton of value in that, and that was a ton of fun to steal the hearts of America. But all that to say, that team didn't have a Bobby Witt Jr., so I expect Bobby Witt Jr. and this core, and it's not all on BWJ, but I expect it to get to the point where they're in the playoffs for 3 straight years, 4 straight years, 5 straight years. Because it should be easier to build a team around Bobby Witt Jr., who I think is better than any player on that roster. MJ Melendez could be special. One of Vinny or Nick Prado or both could be special. So you want to fill in this roster as quickly as possible and make a playoff arrival versus a playoff appearance. And that is what I think is at stake. Because as the roster is currently constructed, you have to take a full-fledged step back. You have to restart this rebuild from the ground up with a handful of players in mind. So something like the trade deadline, something like next Tuesday, and something like trading Andrew Benintendi, it can accelerate that. Especially now with the resources you have. Not only the superstar player in Bobby Witt Jr., but you have more playoff spots than ever. And you have currently the weakest division in baseball. Go capitalize. Go capitalize. And they're playing better baseball in the last month. They're playing above 500 in July. But they do this every year, right? They start terrible, they bury themselves, and then they play great in September, and we get excited and do this all over again. What I want you to focus on is the return for Andrew Benintendi. That's the biggest domino to fall, because that's the domino that could change the course of this franchise. And I know it sounds like a defeatist attitude, but to me, the goal in baseball shouldn't be to win a World Series, because you can construct the best roster we've ever seen and get bounced in the first round, because that's baseball. That's baseball. Now, in the NBA, to me, for example, the goal should always be to build a team that can win a championship, because in the NBA, we see far less upsets. 1 or 2 guys can truly carry you to the promised land, and it's a whole different ballgame. Football sees their fair share of upsets, but typically the best 2 teams are there, or the best, or the top 3 teams are there at the end of the year, whatever the case is. But baseball and hockey, those are 2 sports where you're just happy if you can build a consistent playoff contender, because you feel like if you're in the playoffs consistently, then you're going to eventually break through, because the odds have to eventually bounce your way. The ball or puck has to bounce your way in those 2 sports. So that's why this deadline is so huge. It's not just selling off pieces. It's recalibrating this rebuild. and getting them back on the right track. So coming up, we'll talk about who the latest contenders are for Andrew Benintendi. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at BlueNile.com. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers have handcrafted perfect engagement rings. Each ring is one of a kind. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Well, Blue Nile has a jeweler expert on hand 24/7, available via phone or live chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. I want to tell you right now that you can make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and go now to Blue Nile for the anniversary sale. Save up to 40% on classic fine jewelry pieces and 25% on engagement rings. Plus, every order is insured, it ships for free, and arrives in a discreet package that will not give away what's inside. So shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. We are back on the Locked On Royals podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Royals. Email the show, LockedOnRoyals@gmail.com. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever else you get your podcasts from. And if you're on YouTube, drop us a comment. If you're on a podcasting platform, drop us a 5-star rating if you don't mind. And let's talk now about this trade deadline. So it appears that the Yankees are one of, if not the most serious contender for Andrew Benintendi, but they still have a lot of balls in the air. And that's where I find this deadline very interesting. How much of what we're hearing right now is fact or fiction? What I mean by that is, it sounds strange given the fact that we are, only a week away or 6 days away from the deadline. It sounds weird to say this, but we're still very early in this process. So right now, you're waiting on concrete rumors and you're hearing murmurs of other things. So what I mean by that is, with the Yankees, they're in on Juan Soto. Well, is Juan Soto truly available, or is he not truly available? There's reports from The Athletic about the Angels taking calls on Shohei Ohtani. John Heyman, tweets out that the Marlins are listening on Jazz Chisholm and everyone not named Sandy Alcantara. Like, there are so many high-profile names out there on the marketplace right now that it's really great for clicks. It's really great for interaction. It's really great for excitement and for rumors and for hypotheticals. But the bottom line is, unless we're about to see something historic happen and a historic trade deadline that we're never going to forget, not every one of those stars, Brian Reynolds and Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto, not every single one of those stars, Jazz Chisholm, are going to be traded. Some of those rumors are fake, or some of those rumors spun from, hey, we called about Juan Soto. They said they want every single one of our top 10 prospects. We said no, hung up the phone, that's it. But technically, we did talk about Juan Soto in a trade, technically. So figuring out how those stars trade requests are going and trade rumors are going will impact the Andrew Benintendi market. Because if the Yankees can get Brian Reynolds or can get Juan Soto, that takes them out of the running for Benintendi. But also, they're going to do that. Those guys are simply better than Benintendi, better options than Benintendi, which is no shame to Benintendi. Juan Soto is one of the best players in the sport. He's one of the top 10 players in the sport. So we'll see kind of when that dies down. Either dies down or heats up. Like, either we find out in the next 2 days that Juan Soto is for sure getting traded, or we find out, hey, they tested the waters, but that's off the table, and then teams really start to focus on Benintendi. Because I really struggle to find a better outfield option than Benintendi out there. Now, again, if Soto's available, if Brian Reynolds is available, then that changes. So just playing fact or fiction right now is difficult, even though we're only 6 days away, but you still have to try to do it. So with Benintendi, again, Yankees most serious, it feels like. However, the Braves have now shifted their sights a little bit to Benintendi as well. And it makes sense to me. Like, it makes sense to me why teams would go for Benintendi, who are contending, because we read off his playoff numbers last episode yesterday. He competed well in the playoffs. He played well in the playoffs, won a World Series with the Red Sox. He's having one of his better years. All signs point to Benintendi being a valuable piece for you at the plate in the playoffs. And also, he won a Gold Glove last year. He's still playing really good defense. Like, he can do all of these things that you want for the future. Now, I don't think that Zach Greinke will get traded, but one name on the trading block who I still am interested in is Whit Merrifield. Because to me, it's a big three of Benintendi, Michael A. Taylor, Whit Merrifield. And to me, a Michael A. Taylor trade comes out of nowhere. Like, I don't think that there's going to be a ton of rumors about Michael A. Taylor leading up to Tuesday. I think that we're going to find out on Tuesday where he's going, if he gets dealt. I don't think there's going to be a lot of smoke around that. But with Whit Merrifield, it's not a no-brainer in either direction, and that's the hardest decision to make if you're Dayton Moore. That's the hardest decision to make in life. Whenever there's no right answer that's staring you in the face, and you've got to try to sift through what's the lesser of two evils, so to say. Because if you trade Whit Merrifield now, you're trading him at an all-time low value. He's having his worst year in his career by far in every statistical category, and including defensive statistical categories. He's having his worst years of his career. So you're selling him at an all-time low, and you wonder, could he bounce back next year? Could he fetch you more value next year? But there also seems to be an awkwardness, a discontent with Whit and the organization and the fan base. How do you balance that as well? Do you at this point just want to go your separate ways? There are a lot of things at stake with Whit Merrifield that I think will be interesting. And how do other teams value him? Because you can either say, hey, this is a slump and this season got off to a very slow start, and he's playing for a team in dead last for most of the year, so maybe, just maybe, they'll rejuvenize him by putting him on a contender. Or they might look at him and say, hey, he's a 30-plus-year-old player that is having a career year. These are clear signs of regression. So what are the best spots for Whit Merrifield? I want to dive into that. We did this yesterday for Benintendi. Let's do this today for Whit Merrifield coming up. But first, I want to tell you right now, my good friends over at Sport Card Investors. Now, this is my favorite app on my phone right now because I never truly got into sport cards as a kid. So coming into it as an adult, it became more popular than it was whenever I was a kid. Like, I feel like the popularity right now for sport cards is as high as it's been since, the 80s or the 70s, something like that. So for me, why I love Sport Card Investor is, since I didn't get into it until recently, like last month, I'm not quite sure what all these banners mean, what all these relics mean, what prisms are. Like, I'm not so sure what makes each card so valuable or what makes each card so important. And what Sports Card Investor does, you go onto your app, and let's look at Patrick Mahomes. The football season is going to be upon us. They reported to camp today. Patrick Mahomes, his 2021 Disco Prism card, number 190, it's up 154% over the last 7 days. It is shooting up the marketplace. Now, we talked about Merrifield having an all-time low value on the trade market. Let's see what he is on the card market. On the card market, he's down 16.7% in the last month, 22% in the last month on this Topps Heritage card. So each card that's on the marketplace is trending downward in price value. So if you think that Whit will bounce back and eventually turn his career back around, you can buy in right now on a PSA 10 card, the best you can get, and get in cheaper than ever on this card. So it does a great job of breaking down what you should be looking for and what you should be kind of investing in if you want to go the investing route. And here's another thing. Since I, again, did not get into cards early on, if I go buy a pack of cards right now and rip it open, I can then go see how excited I should be about these certain cards. How excited should I be about this pull, especially in baseball with all the different prospect cards you can buy and stuff like that. So check it out today, Sport Card Investor. Do it right now. Download the app, Sport Card Investor, today on your App Store, Google Play Store. Go right now, sportcardinvestor.com/lockedon as well, if you want to do it that way. Check them out today, Sport Card Investor. We are back on the Locked On Royals podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Royals. For your next listen, check out Locked On MLB. Locked On MLB will have the national perspective on all of this trade deadline stuff. Now, Whit Merrifield. Tough call. To me, I would trade him. To me, I would trade him, understanding I'm going to get the less value than I ever would have gotten. But I do think after the fiasco that happened last week, it is time for a clean break between Whit Merrifield and this organization. It's best for both parties involved. You move on from what seems to be a bad clubhouse leader, and he moves on from what he seems to be an environment he doesn't want to be in. And he gets to be a contender for the first time in his career. He gets to kind of play out the back end of his prime, back end of his playing career on a contending team and win baseball games for once. So I just think it's best for both parties involved to just get this over with. Now, some fits for him is interesting because technically speaking, he can play almost any position, right? I mean, he could play first if you need him to. He could play third. He could play short. He could play second. He could play outfield. But obviously, you feel most comfortable with him playing second and outfield. Every outfield spot is a luxury as well. So teams like the Mariners, White Sox, even the Dodgers could have some interest because they're all dealing with some sort of injury throughout this process. I'd be interested to see what the Giants want to do because they've made some deals that have depleted their outfield depth a little bit, at least to me. So maybe they could be a fit as well. And then the beautiful thing is, even as we mention how bad his value is on the field this year, if you can talk a GM into, hey, this is just a mental thing. Like once you re-energize him by being on a contender, he's going to turn it around and he can play all these positions for you. That is a lot of value to have that insurance. I mean, look at Ben Zobrist. Now, again, Ben Zobrist had a much better year than what Merrifield's having right now for Kansas City. But Ben Zobrist was able to come in, was supposed to fill that need for second base. Gordon gets hurt right after the deadline. He's able to fill that need in the outfield and is able to help propel you into the playoffs and then go back to his position and then help you win a World Series, get a World Series ring, go to Chicago the next offseason, do the exact same thing, win World Series MVP. So, there is value in the multiple positions. There is inherent value in that, even if his statistical categories are at a career low right now. So what do you think about Whit Merrifield getting traded? Would you trade him? Would you keep him and try to recoup some value next year? Where are you at on Whit Merrifield? Let me know in the comment section below or on Twitter. Until then, be good and be good to one another.